First of all, thank you very much for talking to us. We really appreciate it. Can I ask you about what Virginia Giuffre says happened the first time she says she was forced to have sex with Prince Andrew, which was March 2001 in London?
Yes, she describes it in the book in great detail. Ghislaine Maxwell woke her up that day saying, "Get out of bed, sleepyhead," and the whole idea was, we're going to have an amazing day. She quickly was told that she was going to meet a prince. This was a young woman who, as a tiny child, had loved the movie Cinderella, and the idea of meeting a prince was exciting to her. And so Ghislaine took her shopping, and she put on this outfit and went and met Prince Andrew. It was in Ghislaine's home, and they had flown. It was Virginia's first time in London. It was her first time abroad. Ghislaine had helped her fill out her passport application, and they went to a meal. They went to Tramp's nightclub, where they danced together, Virginia and the prince. And then when they came home, on the ride home, they were not in the same car as the prince himself. He was with his security detail. And Ghislaine and Giuffre told her, "You now must do for him what you do for us." So when they got home, Ghislaine and Giuffre excused themselves and basically sent her off to sexually service Prince Andrew.
And he denies any sexual contact. He has said he has no recollection of ever meeting her. The third time she says she was forced to have sex with him involved Prince Andrew, Epstein, and 8 other young girls.
Yes, the 8 other young girls, she was told, were supplied. This was on the island, the private island that Giuffre owned. It was called Little St. James. Giuffre called it Little St. Jeff's. And the young girls did not speak English other than Virginia. And Virginia was told that they had been procured by Jean-Luc Brunel, who was a modeling agent in Paris, who was a close associate of Epstein. And he had flown these young women in. There was some joking about how these are the easiest females to deal with, the ones who can't speak English. And yes, Virginia was a part of that orgy.
According to the book, Epstein had become fascinated by sadomasochism, and this was to cause great physical pain to Virginia Giuffre, wasn't it?
Yes, it was horrible. She was basically hogtied. She was made to crawl across the floor, etc. And again, you know, I think what this book does is it catalogs some of those most painful and awful experiences that she had, but it also attempts to show Virginia as a woman in full. You know, she had some very, very terrible abusive experiences in her young life, and then she escaped, and she became a mom, and then once she had her 3rd child, a daughter, she realized, I'm now the mother of a female child. I'm realizing I'm sending her out into the world where she could experience anything like I had. And so I need to do something. And at that point, she decides, I'm going to come forward publicly and try to hold my abusers to account. You know, this isn't just about Prince Andrew. There's more than a dozen, if not dozens, of men out there who Virginia knew Epstein and Maxwell together had trafficked Virginia to.
Yeah.
So it's not just about Prince Andrew.
Absolutely. And there is one, I mean, all the accounts are distressing, but there is one particularly distressing testimony where she says a former minister, she describes him as a former minister, she says, raped her on Epstein's island and choked her till she lost consciousness. Why hasn't Virginia Giuffre named all of these men in the book that she accuses of abusing her?
Well, she's pretty clear about this in the last section of the book. You know, any person who has been abused, forced to have sex against their will with someone they don't want to have sex with, makes this choice. They have to weigh, you know, the cost of coming forward, which I can delineate, but any normal person can figure out. The cost of your privacy, the cost of your safety if the person is dangerous, the time and anguish you have to spend and endure when you have to relate again and again in depositions what happened. You have to relive the moment. She's weighing that against what her core goal was, which is to make the world a better place and to hold these people to account, and to, in some ways, comment by doing that on the fact that it's not right that people who have money and power get to mistreat people who don't. That's not okay. In the case of the former minister she mentioned, she was afraid of him. She was afraid he would hurt her or kill her. There were other men who had threatened her in more genteel ways, basically saying, take our names out of your mouth, or we will keep you in court for the rest of your days.
And it's important to let our audience know that you know the names of these people because you did the fact-checking, as you were explaining earlier. Donald Trump is mentioned in this book, and Virginia Giuffre is complimentary about him.
Yes, well, you know, she'd met him at Mar-a-Lago. Mar-a-Lago is the spa and hotel and club that he owns in Florida, and Virginia was working there as a towel girl making $9 an hour in the spa when Ghislaine Maxwell strolled in and procured her, sort of deceived her into coming to Jeffrey Epstein's house. And so we can talk about that if you want to, but she had met Trump, and he was kind to her in those early days when she was 15 and 16, I believe. She may have met him even when she was younger because her father worked there. And then right before we closed the book in October, I was in Australia with her, and the presidential election was about to happen, and he was running yet again for president. And he had campaigned on the plank, in part, that he was going to release the Epstein files.
How could the information, the names in the files, help survivors of Epstein and Maxwell?
Well, for one thing, it could stop putting the impetus on the survivors, on Virginia's book, on me, to name the names. Why should the survivors who have bravely come forward and named the names to law enforcement have to keep on pushing it? Law enforcement should take over.
On Friday, Prince Andrew was forced to announce he was voluntarily giving up his Duke of York title and some other titles. He still retains them officially, he just won't be using them. What do you think of that?
I can speak for Virginia. I know that she would view it as a victory, that he was forced, by whatever means, to voluntarily give them up. For many, maybe particularly in the United States, but maybe even in the UK, it's a symbolic gesture, but it's an important one. It's made history, modern history, in terms of the royal era. I mean, I've never heard of such a thing happening. And it also is just a step in the right direction. You know, Virginia wanted all the men who she'd been trafficked to against her will to be held to account. And this is just one of the men, but he is being forced to, even though he continues to deny it, his life is being eroded because of his past behavior, as it should be. You know, the other thing about Prince Andrew that always kind of lingers in my mind is that there was a period where he indicated that he was willing to help investigators in the United States as they tried to do their due diligence. But he was never available for some reason to do that. He said he would, but he never did. And that's something he could still do. He could say, as he has repeatedly, I still deny that I was involved. Even though I settled with her when she sued me, I still deny that I did anything wrong. However, I was in these houses, and I was on that island, and I was on the jet, and I saw things, and I know how much these women have suffered, and I would like to share what I saw. Remember, these jets, they weren't just private. They had been remodeled in order to afford many bedrooms. They were designed as flying trafficking agents. They were there to use girls in. And Prince Andrew was on at least one of those jets that I know of, if not more. He saw things, and he could come forward about those things.
And he should do that now, do you believe?
Well, he has to take sort of the measure of his own moral compass. He said in his settlement with Virginia that he now acknowledges the pain that these women and young girls had suffered. If you really acknowledge that, if you really feel it, do something about it.
And he not only acknowledged it, he also pledged in that statement when he settled with Virginia Giuffre that he would support the fight against the evil of sex trafficking and he would support victims.
Exactly. Have you seen anything he's done that has done that? I haven't.
The book details the sexual abuse Virginia says Ghislaine Maxwell subjected her and others to. And some think that Maxwell's role was only about procuring girls for Epstein and his friends.
It has mystified me, even after she's been convicted of hurting girls and women, that somehow the narrative has shifted, that she was like some sort of receptionist who just kept track of who was going to come in when and service Jeffrey Epstein. That is completely and patently false.
And so any suggestion, and there are suggestions of this, that she should be pardoned, what do you make of that?
Well, she should absolutely not be pardoned. It's patently ridiculous. This is a person who is convicted, first of all, in a court of law. This is a woman who used to park herself outside of private schools in New York City to try to intercept young girls coming out of high school. So she was a master procurer.
Virginia Giuffre took her own life earlier this year. She wanted this book to be published. How do you reflect, Amy, on the fact that she is not here now?
So I'm sad, and I'm honored to be able to speak at least a little bit in her behalf, to stand up for her. She deserved that. You know, she did that. She wrote this book for all of us. She wrote this book to try to help other people, to make the world a better place. And she deserves all credit for whatever role she played in forcing Prince Andrew to relinquish a few more of his titles. But she deserves all credit, even more than that, for being brave enough to stand up, to say, this isn't right. She was a galvanizer. She was a hero. And there's too much carping out there still about how, well, I don't know, maybe she shouldn't be believed, or, well, if it was all so hard for these girls, why didn't they just leave? And the answer to that last question is, when you grow up in a world where what you've learned from your own personal experience is that grown men rape young children and they get away with it, you don't necessarily think when you walk out the door of Epstein's mansion in Manhattan and flee that it's going to be any better out there. For Virginia, it had not been.
Amy Wallace, thank you very much for talking to Newsnight this evening. We really, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Of course, of course.